Hello again, welcome to part 2 for this lab solution. So for this part we're asking you to use an if-else statement to get users' input and draw a couple different shapes. So there's a few different parts here that you would need to take into consideration, and you can do them in pretty much whatever order that you want. So specifically, you're going to have to ask the user for input, and you're going to have to specify what format, what you want them to input. All right, so, the name, the shape, or whatever, or come up with some way so that you know what shape they're picking. You're going to have to decide what shapes you're going to draw. If you did something fancy on the previous lab, you could reuse that. That's fine. You have to come up with, 2 other shapes as well. For this particular lab, I went really simple. I just did, a triangle, a square, and a rectangle because I'm not an artist. But if you did want to do something a little fancier, that's awesome. Go for it. We want you to have fun with this stuff. And then you're going to have to create an if-else statement. So I'm going to do this in a particular order. So first I'm going to decide on my shapes, because once I know what shapes I can draw, I can ask people for the correct input. And if you're looking at the right side of the screen, you can see that I've kind of already done this and tested it to make sure that it works. But I'll go through it with you now. So basically, so I said rectangle, triangle, and a square, and I'll actually show you the code for that later. I'm not going to go through actually drawing them for right now, because it's a little tedious. You just draw a lot of lines and turn. It's not very interesting. But now that we've decided on the shapes, we can ask people for their input. So just like asking the name on the first part, you're going to use the input statement. You're going to store it in a variable. So I like to be pretty specific in the instructions that I give people. So here, and you can see on the right side of the screen that I've already been pretty specific, because if people don't know what to type, how are they going to know? If you don't tell people what the options are, how are they going to know what to type? So here I'm actually going to use a few print statements just to say print what shape, type R for rectangle. I can't spell though. And then I'm actually going to use a couple different print statements because I want this all to be able to show up on the screen for you. You could do this all in one line, it doesn't matter. So type S for square or T for triangle. And then I can do the input statement. So I can say, I'm just going to use the variable name shape because it's simple. Shape equals input R, S, or T, just as a question. So there's something there to show the user that, hey, you're being prompted to type something in. So we can save that, and that will run, and you'll see something like on the right here, where it then asks what they want to do, and they type it in, and then something happens. Now, at the moment, nothing's going to happen because we don't have anything in the code. So what I would like to do next is set up the if-else statement, and then we can worry about putting in the code for each of the different shapes. So if someone wants a rectangle, then we're going to have to check to see, well, did they type an R? So the way we set that up is, we use the if statement, and we're comparing to see if shape is equal to the lowercase letter r. I'm not going to worry about checking for capitals or anything like that, right? We told them to type R, S, or T. If they can't figure that out, they can try it again. So if shape, and then we want to compare it to the string lowercase r. So R is going to be in quotes, and then don't forget that if we're checking to see if 2 things are equal, we're doing the comparison, we use 2 equal signs. So if shape equal R, then we know they're going to want a rectangle. So before we even type in the code to draw an actual rectangle, I'm just going to put in a print statement that says, you picked rectangle. And then that way, we know that the if statement is actually working, but without having to write in all the turtle code first, right? for this, I'm gonna kind of skip going over like the whole, I save it and I run it and I show you everything, because I don't want this video to be really long. I want people to actually watch it. So I'm just gonna put in the next statement. So we do, and don't forget that because this is, the print statement is part of the if, then that gets indented. So next we want to check to see, well, if they didn't type R, maybe they typed an S. So elif, right, because this is an else associated with the previous if shape equal S, then we can print square. And then finally for the last one, we could assume that if they didn't type R or S, that they typed T, so the default case would always be triangle. So we could just do else print triangle. If you don't like that, if you want to put in an extra check, you could do an elif here and say shape equal T, and then that would print triangle. And then for else, you could say print that wasn't an option. So that way if someone types in something that you haven't actually written the code for, they still get a message that says, hey, I see that you typed something, I just can't accommodate that request. I don't have the code for it. Alright, so if we ran this, they would be prompted to type in a letter and the user would get the feedback. So the main things to keep in mind here is you have to do the comparison. Here we're comparing just to, we're comparing what the person typed in to specific strings that we pre-specified. You don't have to have used R, S, and T here. You could have used the full strings, rectangle, square, and triangle, or whatever shapes you decided to draw. Obviously you would modify this so it fits your actual code. This is just one example of a way to approach this problem. Alright? So don't worry if you did something slightly different, but the general shape of this should be basically what I have, which is you ask the user for input, and then based on that input, you do something. Now, we're supposed to be drawing things, not just printing stuff, so I'm actually going to show you the code that I previously had for this. I kind of put it down at the bottom here to hide it a little bit. So I have these shape options, and here you can see I use T, and I actually don't have an else at the end, which is also totally an option. So you can see I'm just using some straight lines and 90-degree angles for the rectangle and square, just different amounts for rectangles, all the same side for square, and I'm actually reusing the triangle code that I used from the last part of the last lab, because hey, I already drew a triangle, why would I not just keep using it? So yeah, so that basically all this stuff goes together to form one program that does a few different things. It asks the user what shape they'd like to draw, and then depending on what they type in, it draws that shape. So you can see here on the right, for the last instance, I typed in T, and you can see that in fact it does draw a triangle. So that's the basic approach here. You get the input, depending on the input, you use those if statements to do different things and determine what parts of the code are going to run. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, if you have your own takes on the shapes or how you want exactly what input you asked for, that is totally fine, but this is kind of the general approach we were looking for you to take. Alright, see you for part 3.